Well, a warm welcome to today's video. It is Monday the 11th of May. Thank you for tuning back in. Now, there's quite a few things I want to talk about today. First of all, I want to talk about some things that are concerning me. So we'll start off with that, I think. Things I'm concerned about, things I'm worried about. And the first and most obvious one is this pandemic is still increasing in most of the world. So the cases now, the official cases that we know about, are over 4 million. And of course, the real number has got to be much higher than that. And the number of deaths is now approaching 300,000. It's 282,947 at the moment. And it's interesting that not all of the deaths caused by COVID-19 are recorded, especially in a lot of poorer areas in the world. So the final death toll from this pandemic will probably never be known exactly. But we do know at the moment it's increasing, so it's concerning. I'm afraid we are still at a fairly early stage in this pandemic, and things are going to go on increasing in many parts of the world and altering our lifestyle in the Western world for at least the rest of this year. Now, let me start off with some of the things that are concerning me about different countries, and then I will have something to say about hydroxychloroquine later on, but you'll have to stick around for that. We can only do one thing at a time. The news is, well, we'll do it later. Right, now things that I'm concerned about. Now, the United States is I'm afraid on my list of concerns this morning. Now, we know the number of cases is increasing and the number of deaths are increasing, although the rate of increase is less than it was. But what we have now is progressive reopening of the country. Now, I get challenged a lot for saying this, but I do believe that the reopening in the States is going to lead to more cases in the States. And I get quite a lot of criticism about United States bashing. Believe me, I love American people. This is just thinking how we can improve things, how we can make things better. All countries have made mistakes, with the possible exception of Taiwan. but everyone's made mistakes. We have to learn. We have to learn and move on. That's the key thing. So there is progressive reopening. Not saying there's an alternative to that. It probably needs to be done for economic reasons, but it does mean there's going to be more cases. And there's a lot of people in the United States, 330 million people. So the potential for a lot of people to be infected and for deaths to significantly increase is there. And it was interesting to note that there's been some cases in the White House, and several advisors are going into putting themselves into quarantine. Dr. Fauci put himself into something I think he called, I can't remember what he called it actually, something like qualified quarantine or something. It sounded a bit strange to me. Anyway, so that's happening. But I did learn that the President and President Trump and Mike Pence, Vice President, are tested on a daily basis according to American news. So that was interesting. So I'm afraid I do see gradual increase in cases in the United States now. And of course, the big concern is that the R0 value is going to rise over 1. So if we end up with an R0 of 1.2, then we will get accelerated growth in the United States, unfortunately. Now, this is very concerning, and I've got very limited data on it. But we do know there's been cases in Italy, the United Kingdom, and New York that we know of. Have there been more than the 20 cases in England? I don't know. I haven't seen any more reporting on it. I've read no medical literature on it. Are there cases in France and Germany in children? Well, again, I haven't read anything on that. I haven't been able to find anything out. Are there other cases in other parts of the United States other than New York? Again, I don't know that. I haven't heard that. But we do know that the governor of New York has told us that 70 children are currently in hospital in New York. And I think that's just in New York City. I don't think that's the whole state. So that is frightening. on the positive side, it's still very rare. It's still very rare. But are these cases increasing would be my concern. Is there something going on here? Is there an increasing cases in children? Which would be alarming. And distressingly, 3 children have died in New York. From this seems to be post-exposure syndrome. It seems to develop later on after the child maybe even cleared the virus. And it's called Pediatric Multisystem Inflammatory Syndrome, and we have looked at it in the past. So that is a concern. If it's happening in New York now, will this be happening in other parts of the world where the medical care is not as good as it is in New York, meaning that there's going to be a higher death rate than we anticipated in the world in children? I do hope not, but I am actually I do feel genuine anxiety about that prospect. Time will tell. We need more data. Now, countries that are concerning, war-torn Yemen, just south of Saudi Arabia. 51 cases and 8 deaths, but this is fairly meaningless. But the WHO, the World Health Organization experts on the ground in Yemen, now say there is full-blown transmission. Now, full-blown isn't a medical term, but what it means is there is established community transmission without epidemiological links. And given the conditions in Yemen, this means we will see greatly increased spread in Yemen. This exponential rise will occur in Yemen, I'm afraid. And that will feed through into more cases and more deaths. Now, how many of those eventually get tested? We don't know, because it's a war situation. How many deaths are going to occur? Again, we might never know that, but we know from the dynamics of this disease that there's going to be widespread spread in Yemen, and there's going to be cases, and there's going to be many ill people and fatalities. And the case fatality rate will be higher because the healthcare system has been not quite destroyed, but massively impacted by the war. Now, Pakistan is another concerning area, again, largely due to the confined area a lot of people live in, a bit similar to India in a lot of ways. The cases and the deaths don't look too bad yet for the size of population, but we do know there's been an increase in cases, and there's also phased reopening in Islamabad. Now, I know there's no alternative to this because people have been hungry, but this phased reopening, I do believe, will accelerate the spread of the virus as people come into contact with each other. Now, North Korea. Now, of course, North Korea has no known cases. There are no cases in North Korea officially. But of course, we do know differently. Even way back in February, there was alarming reports from South Korean scientists that indicated the atmosphere over North Korea indicated more cremations. So this has been a problem for a while in North Korea. Now, on the positive side, the North Korean borders, which are already largely shut down anyway, they shut down the borders early. But of course, North Korean borders are generally shut down. So has there been a lot of spread from South Korea? No, I'd probably not. But there's a great deal of cross-border trade between North Korea and China. So I'm afraid my suspicion is, and the evidence from the cremations, if that turns out to be true, would indicate that there was spread in North Korea at an early stage in this pandemic across the Chinese border. Because very often the only way people can eat in North Korea is by trading across the border in China. And Xi Jinping, the president of China, is concerned about the situation in North Korea. And he's publicly expressed his concern. So what we really see there is the Chinese state admitting there is a big problem in North Korea. And we know people there are malnourished, they're going to be immunosuppressed. We know the healthcare system is very, very weak. And it really is concerning that the people of North Korea that have suffered so much already are suffering more under the idolatrous system that they live under. And of course, Kim Jong-un, the president of North Korea, actually went missing for a few weeks, which was a bit strange. Did he have the disease? We don't know. He didn't seem to have lost any weight at the end of it. But he didn't look too good either. Or was he in protective quarantine? Of course, we don't know. It's North Korea. But I am very concerned about the plight of the ordinary people in North Korea, because if Xi Jinping is concerned, that's enough to make me concerned as well, because I think we can assume that the Chinese government is well informed about the situation in North Korea. Now, the Eastern European country of Belarus, again, not too many cases and not too many deaths. That's the death figure there that we know of, official reporting. But they just don't seem to be taking anything seriously there. So the disease is there. Almost certainly there is COVID-19 community transmission in Belarus. But they had full Victory in Europe Day memorials. You might have seen this on TV with the parades and everything. And of course, Russia and Europe cancelled their events and made them, they basically cancelled all mass gatherings. I mean, for example, in the UK, we had a very moving sequence of TV things about it, but it was all done remotely for Victory in Europe Day. But not so in Belarus. They had the full-blown thing with no social distancing. Now, what this reminded me of was the Mardi Gras celebrations in New Orleans. Now, I know it's a completely different thing. I know this is a memorial and the Mardi Gras is a party, a celebration. But basically, you had a lot of people together in a small space, celebrating and remembering things. And it just means you've got guaranteed spread in that situation. So we are going to see greatly increased cases in Belarus. Again, whether that's reflected in the official figures, we might never know. But it is going to be the case. And for Russia to cancel its Victory in Europe Day celebrations, especially on the 75th anniversary, is just a huge thing. I mean, of course, the ordinary Russian people suffered so massively in the Second World War. So concern there about Belarus and country not seem to be taking things seriously at all. Brazil also. Now, Brazil is a tale of two sets of governments. You've got the president in the middle who's not taking this seriously at all, getting angry with the regional governors for trying to take measures. The president's actually going out of his way to show that he's behaving normally. And yet we know the cases are rising and we know the deaths are rising. So that concerns me greatly. So I'm going to leave Italy till the next time. We'll do that separately. I just wanted to do a brief review of cases that were concerning me particularly at the moment. And of course, we need to talk about the New England Journal of Medicine on hydroxychloroquine. Now, I don't think I've ever had so much criticism and emails and indignant comments about anything I've reviewed so far in the history of these COVID-19 series. And that's good. I'm pleased to see that. Now, I do apologise for upsetting people. I do not intend to upset people. What I was trying to do was report what was in the peer-reviewed literature. That's what I was trying to do. Now, of course, lots of you wrote in with very legitimate points. And we could have spent days arguing this back and forward at the time. Perhaps it would have been better to do that rather than give the wrong impression. But I'm not trying to say what I think. I'm not trying to argue a position. I'm not saying, well, this is my position, I'm sticking to it. Not at all. This is just thinking out loud. In this case, trying to explain what is in peer-reviewed literature. Because the New England Journal of Medicine is a prestigious journal. Now, we can give some counter-argument to it now, of course. And I think that might be good to do. Now, it is true that this study was looking at people that were already sick, that were already hospitalised. And it doesn't tell us about the role of hydroxychloroquine early on in infection. It says nothing about that, but we weren't trying to say that. I was just trying to explain what is in the paper. And again, this is not me giving a position. Now, if hydroxychloroquine does turn out to be useful in the early stages and as a prophylactic, I would be absolutely delighted because it's cheap and it's readily available. Now, a lot of you did make a very serious point, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I do believe there is something in this. And that is the pharmaceutical companies have no interest in hydroxychloroquine curing this condition or acting as a prophylactic measure in this pandemic because they can't make money out of it. The same with vitamin D. They can't make money out of vitamin D. Is that why vitamin D is not being promoted? I have no idea. So the big pharmacological companies aren't going to make a lot of money out of hydroxychloroquine or vitamin D because they're cheap and off copyright. So if they're effective, then that's wonderful as far as I'm concerned. And a lot of people mention that hydroxychloroquine. So first of all, this paper says nothing about how useful hydroxychloroquine is as a prophylactic or how useful it is as a treatment in the early stages. But the trouble is, lots of you sent me interesting references in, I was up till 1 o'clock in the morning, in fact slightly later last night looking through all these, and I didn't actually find any peer-reviewed literature on the efficacy of hydroxychloroquine. Now, I did find quite a lot of ongoing clinical studies, trials which may at some point show it's efficacious, and if that works out, I would be delighted. I'm not taking a position. This is the point. Now, what a lot of you did point out, and this is completely legitimate, I was actually hoping to, we'll see him in a minute, I was actually hoping to get away with the science, but what a lot of you did point out was that what you often need to do is give zinc and hydroxychloroquine at the same time. So when a virus gets into when the COVID-19 virus gets into the cell and its RNA gets into the cell, that RNA has to replicate, viral replication. And if there's plenty of zinc around, that inhibits the replication of that virus. At least we believe it does this in vitro experiments. But the zinc can't readily get through the cell membrane round about the cell, because this is what we call a phospholipid bilayer. It's a fatty bilayer, and things don't get readily through that bilayer into the cell. Now that's good because you don't want everything that's in the environment getting into the cell, and you don't want stuff that's in the cell getting out into the environment. So it's good that we have this impervious phospholipid bilayer around about the cell. Fatty. Basically, it's a fatty membrane with phosphate in it. So, but this phospholipid bilayer is what we call a fluid mosaic membrane. So it's fluid, and floating in the surface of it, we have various proteins. So there's protein floating in the surface of it, and these proteins have functions. And one of the proteins on the surface acts as what we call an ionophore. Now, this comes from the Greek for carriage, like an amphora. An amphora in Greek, you used to carry wine or olive oil in it. So what hydroxychloroquine will actually do is it will make a bit of a gate. It will open up an ionophore through the cell membrane that allows the zinc in. Now, that happens in vitro. We know that happens in vitro. So hydroxychloroquine opens the gate, or the inophore, that can let zinc into the cell, and we believe that zinc will inhibit viral replication. But whether this actually works in vivo, in real life or not, I don't know of the clinical evidence that says this works. It's fine having something that works on the bench, and that gives us good indications of where to look at. But what I was saying yesterday is this study says it's not efficacious in the later stages of the disease. And that's what I was reporting on. Now, if it turns out that, as some of you thought, that the New England Journal of Medicine is lying about this, that would just be that would basically turn the academic world upside down. So I really don't believe that's the case. But it's only commenting on what it comments on. It's not commenting about prophylaxis. It's not commenting on the early stages. So let's review what I know. Is hydroxychloroquine efficacious in the later stages of COVID-19 infection in patients that are complicated? Well, I believe this study shows it isn't. I believe it shows it isn't. We need bigger studies, and yesterday I was careful to say we need a proper randomised double-blind controlled trial, because this was only, and I use that word advisedly, only an observational study. That's all it was. We need randomised double-blind controlled trials. Now let me move on to the question, is hydroxychloroquine effective as a prophylactic against COVID-19 infection? I don't know, because I don't believe the peer-reviewed literature is there yet. Is COVID-19 efficacious in the early stages of COVID-19 infection? I don't know, because I don't believe the evidence is there yet. Now, lots of you sent in discussion papers and pre-peer-reviewed papers that said interesting things, but some of those were contradicting each other. So basically, the stage is too early to tell. I do hope it turns out it's useful because it's cheap. I really hope it does. And as we've seen in many of these challenged countries, we really need something that's efficacious and something that's readily available and something that's cheap. I'm convinced by the evidence for vitamin D. I await further evidence on hydroxychloroquine. Prophylaxis, early stages, don't know. Not what that paper was about. Hope that's clarified that. Anyway, I've come up with another trustworthy saying. Of course, I haven't come up with it. It's not mine. Follow the evidence wherever it leads. Now, I've completely changed my views on some things because the evidence is there. So if the evidence is there for a treatment, fine. If the evidence is not there, what is the evidence? Let's follow the evidence. We have to be evidence based. Otherwise, we're just making things up as we go along. But do try and remember when you talk. I don't mind if you're talking to me. You can slag me off as much as you want. But when you're talking to your friends about different treatments, different approaches, then what we have to bear in mind is this is not my position versus your position. This is not me versus you, or it's not you versus your friend Joan or your friend Harry. It's not that. It is about arguing the merits of a position, not arguing the merits of a person. I think we have to distinguish between the two. Now, I was, you probably know I taught nurses, student nurses to be RNs and RNs to be more advanced nurses for a long time. And when I did a year's course to be a teacher trainer course, and in there they tell you something that you learn a method called debates. So the idea is you get your class and you say, right, you argue for that, and have a debate about it. And the idea is that this brings out truth and gets to the finer points with a bit of academic cut and thrust. If you're a teacher, don't even try it. It was a disaster. I tried it once and never again. I had people in my class who weren't talking to each other for months because they were associating the position with the individual. We have to get away from that. We have to look at the merits of a particular argument and try and dissociate that from the individual. The point is that human beings were not very good at that. So that would be my tip if you're a young teacher. Do not use the debate methodology in class. It's a complete disaster unless I completely hashed it up. You might be good at it. I wasn't. Now I want to move on to some photos now. Now this is from Paul in Tamil Nadu. And this is the milkman. So here we see the milkman is pouring the milk into a funnel. It's going down this long tube to the customer there. So social distancing is being maintained. So I thought that was quite excellent innovation. Now that is today's talk finished. There are other things I want to say today, but I'm not going to say them now. I want to look at some European countries, but that next. So a few pictures. This is breakfast for Erica in Canada, and she's clearly a good sketcher. Quite why she'd want to draw me, I have no idea, but there you go. Oh, talking of drawing me, this is Julia in Zurich. Now, Julia's clearly an excellent artist, and she's drawn this pencil picture of me, which is again, I've no idea why Julia would want to do that, but she's made a remarkably colourful, good job of it. Now, this is the McFall family, who watch as a family together, so it's always great that people watch as a family. So thank you for watching Mr. and Mrs. McFall and Junior McFall. Sorry, I don't know the rest of your names. Now, will this video play? Let's play this video. This is a cat watching me. I don't think you've got sound here, but apparently this cat watches me every day. Minnie the cat, who belongs to Megan in District of Columbia. Right. This is Michael, who watches in Slovakia. So good to know you're watching in Slovakia, Michael, and sporting a very cool looking mask, I think it has to be said. This is Oscar, Kelly, Ella and Dobbs watching in Kenya. Do like Kenya. I did some teaching in Kenya. It's a great country. Has problems like any other, but it's a great country. So that's thank you for watching in Kenya. This is Rashid, who's watching in Kurdistan. Okay, Kurdistan. Brilliant. This is Robert and Nina in Delaware. Good to know you're watching in Delaware. This is Robert, and I'm sorry, Robert, I have no idea where you're watching from, but I'm glad you're watching the Black Dog. Thank you for watching. This is Sage in Australia. I think Sage must keep chickens. I think that's a chicken, which are good because they lay eggs. This is a Surcat in Bangkok. Good to know people are watching in Thailand. Looks like vitamin D on the table there. Excellent. And this is Tara, who's a New Yorker who lives in Paris. So I remember your picture from the other day, Tara. Was it just me looking at it, or were you on? I can't remember. Anyway, you're very welcome. All New Yorkers who live in Paris are welcome to watch this. Anyone everywhere can watch, of course. It's good to know you're watching. Thank you for letting us know. This is Taz from Qatar. Okay, good to know you're taking vitamin D. Taz in Qatar. If you don't have the skin exposure, of course, you won't make much vitamin D, so taking the supplement is a good idea. Valerie in Tennessee. Good to know you're watching in Tennessee, Valerie. This is Warren in Tassie, in Tasmania. Great looking dog. Very good taste to have the Black Dog on at the same time as your dog, of course. So that's us for now. We might come back and look at some European countries later. Thank you for listening to this video.